As the boys head home, they still face potential physical and psychological challenges. Dr. Jon LaPook is here to discuss that part of the story. We look at them, we've told that they've gained at least 7 pounds each. They look so healthy. How do they look to you?
They actually looked fine. They had lost about 9, so they gained almost all of it back. And on their faces, they look good. The 11-year-old looked like a kid, you know, the kind of smiling. The tale of rescue was remarkable to hear some of the details at the beginning.
What?
They're in the dark, and the coach is trying to figure out whether there's a way out. So there's a rope. So he said, if I shake it twice, then you'll know I can get out. But he wasn't able to get out, or that I can't get out. They were signaling each other that way. They were looking for water, and it turns out there was water coming off the side of the cave, and they found they could drink this. There was no food. They had to make a decision. Do you go forward? Do you go backwards? They thought maybe if we go backwards, there will be some sort of exit to the cave there. That turned out not to be true.
But now that they're out, as a doctor, what concerns do you have?
I am worried about what could happen when the camera lights go off. So right now they're in emergency mode still. The adrenaline's flowing, the cortisol's flowing. But weeks or months or even longer than that later, when they're quiet, when the press isn't around, when they're not getting all this attention, they are at increased risk for anxiety, depression, of course, PTSD. It's more of a risk in somebody who goes in with a psychological problem, if you're anxious or depressed to begin with. But there are things that can trigger this later. Of course, think of all the things. Being in the dark, being cold. It was very scary for them when it got dark out and there was no ability to see each other.
And now knowing that they could swim, I mean, we were really concerned that they wouldn't even be able to swim as they started their descent. So that is good news that cleared that up for us. But from a psychological standpoint, does their age benefit them that they are so young? Of course, we're thinking back to the Chilean miners who were, much older, and a lot of them did go through psychological problems.
Yeah, I think being young is often good because you're more resilient, you're physically stronger, but it certainly doesn't immunize you from any kind of problem. And I think, one of the things I was speaking to clinical psychologists about this, that when they get home, they may be a little more clingy. They may be afraid of the dark. And they may have anxiety about, could this happen again? Something could remind them of this. They're swimming and they feel the water. Anything could trigger it. But they sure look pretty good, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. Don't necessarily have the structure to make sure they're mentally okay for a long period of time the way kids, in New York City might.
Yeah, and I love the fact that they had a psychiatrist, a psychologist. They said there's a support system. I do worry about the whole issue. This Saman Kunan, who's the Thai Navy SEAL who died trying to do the rescue, and they mentioned just now that they felt guilty about that. And I do worry about when it gets calmer, when the lights are off, that they might start feeling some guilt about that. So I think this is, it's very exciting right now. It's fantastic. And what a story for the world at a time when there's a lot of friction. Nobody seems to be able to agree about anything, but the entire world got together for one moment and agreed, let's get these kids out.
We're rooting for them.
That's a good part of the story. Thank you, Jon.